Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. The time is 10:02 a.m. This is a special meeting agenda for the Airport Advisory Board. It's an update meeting. Officially calling the meeting to order. Attending Commissioners Duncan, Brooks, and Filios. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Okay, our first business item is a review of the January 12, 2022 Airport Advisory Board minutes. Discussion, go right ahead. Stephen, Greg?
Okay, first of all, we had to take care of some housekeeping business, and that was elect a new chair and a vice chair for the advisory board for 2022. And that was, I was once again reelected as the chair, and Joan Genter was the vice chair. We then moved into a discussion on AWOS, which is the Automated Weather Observation System. And there's been some requests from the Coeur d'Alene Airport Association that we add specific or certain NOTAMs to AWOS. And Mike Koski gave a presentation on the benefits of how that would be. We listened to the presentation, and a quick poll of the board is that, you know, this is something that we can't really change right now. As Stephen goes out and investigates this stuff, we're finding that it can't be done with existing AWOS. And if we choose to add those remarks, it'd be what remarks do we add and what remarks don't we add? And then also you'd have to buy a new AWOS system possibly. So the board basically, in polling the board, it was like, well, let's table this right now. We'll discuss it later. My goal is that we could get some meetings where we're out of this format, where we just sit down and have a conversation about these things rather than have these things come in that we want this AWOS to change. And Stephen says, no, we can't. I have to believe that what Stephen's telling us is true with the existing AWOS. And so I guess it would be up to you in time if the advisory board would recommend or request that you would change the AWOS. It'd be your decision. But right now, it's as it is. It stays as it is.
And commissioners, if the board requests, the county can purchase and run an AWOS. The issue is that can be $100,000 install cost plus $20,000 to $100,000 every year to maintain. If something breaks, it can cost excessively more. That's an added cost to the county and airport. Right now, the system is completely owned by the FAA. They maintain it. They maintain all the comm systems. They do everything. The other item is the request is for critical safety items. The issue I have with that as the director is we disagree on what is critical safety items. The Pilots Association is stating just closures. Well, I view every single NOTAM, which is notice to airmen, right. I view every single notice to airmen as being a critical safety issue.
Okay.
So we should truly put all of those on there if we're going to do something. So we're having a conflict there, and that's just something we'll talk internally once we have those more meetings. But if the board wants to go down that path, it's a very costly system. There are a lot of airports in the country that do have their own. I will fully say that, but I can almost guarantee that all of those airports would prefer to have the FAA own and operate them. So,
for people who are watching but don't know, what does AWOS stand for and what does it do?
Automated Weather Observation System, and basically it's meant to provide weather, and that's it.
Gives you the wind direction, temperature, dew point. Is that it?
It also provides visibility, cloud ceiling. Yeah. Ours also provides precipitation and precipitation type.
Barometric pressure.
Yes.
So what are the deficiencies with the current system?
Ours, for what it's designed to do and what we're capable of doing, it does exactly what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. So my understanding, there's some airports that would say something, not the full NOTAMs like Stephen's talking about, but just there's a temporary tower in place or this runway is closed. So something that's maybe out of the ordinary or unusual because sometimes you have that, the NOTAMs are posted, but the person's already taken off, and so by the time they land, they're not checking NOTAMs again before they land. So I think the pilots were just concerned about just the basic, hey, we have a tower in place, or the runway's closed, or something to that effect. But I think that if we get a temporary tower again next year, I think that this year, oh my goodness,
22.
yeah, I have talked to the FAA, and they're going to look at maybe some more ways to announce the tower. And
Yeah, and I actually spoke with Robert Tickner yesterday. We're both running into the problem of is no one knows who can actually grant that authority. There's an internal argument of whether it's FAA, NOAA, because NOAA is truly a NOAA. The FAA, it's an FAA owned equipment that then that information goes directly to NOAA. Well, NOAA limits that information, and this system isn't truly designed to handle just general typing of remarks. It's very limited in the remarks section of what you can do
sure,
in the actual system.
right,
Because I've dealt with this system in a previous airport where I was a weather observer.
right,
So you can't just type whatever you want into it. It has to be a set number of things.
right.
So nobody's sure whether this has that capability or not.
Okay.
So,
Well, and I think part of the issue too is there's a lot of longtime users here, and they've had that capability until 2016. So with the new equipment, I think is when the issue happened, and we can't do those updates anymore. But I appreciate you checking into it, and I think Mr. Tickner's going to get back with us eventually to find out, okay, if we absolutely cannot do this, what can we do to make sure that people know that there's a temporary tower?
and there is another option that is the county can go out and purchase what's called an ATIS, which is actually really more what this is meant to provide. This type of information. It's called an area terminal information system. That is actually when they're referring to, that's really more of what that's providing. It's terminal information. Typically, you see these associated with a tower, though. And it provides, for example, Phelps Field has one, Spokane has one. They're monitored and created by tower personnel,
Right.
and not airport personnel, because I don't know if I've ever seen a privately held one run by an airport.
Sure.
Yeah, it's not automated voice either then,
No, it's actually a voice recording
that they do.
that's done by tower personnel every hour.
Right.
So where are we leaving this for now?
We're waiting for the FAA to get back to us.
Okay. Regarding,
Whether or not we can, the system as it sits today, we can't access it. We are expressly told by FAA Tech Ops, do not touch this. Yes, it's housed in the airport's building, the control system, but
but it's their system?
it's their system.
Okay.
Yeah, I think,
How do you get along with FAA in general? I mean,
We get along well with them. You gotta keep in mind, it's 15 different lines of business though.
mhm.
Yeah.
So we deal with 4 of them regularly.
Yeah.
And the other 11 we don't deal with that much, but we get along with them, but they all have their own different missions.
Are most of our dealings through Helena?
Yes,
Okay.
but we also deal with FISDO out of Spokane. We also deal with Tech Ops, but Tech Ops out of Spokane is just maintaining the equipment. That's not the actual decision makers behind the equipment.
right.
That is Salt Lake, sometimes DC, sometimes can be Fort Worth. That is a very convoluted thing for them.
All right, so we'll wait for
Yep.
their response. By the way, for everybody's benefit, for people who might be listening in, NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, is that correct? Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Thank-
one thing I'll say
Yeah,
about
go right ahead. Glenn.
AWAS before we go, I mean, to have those capabilities on an AWAS would be nice. It's an opportunity to eliminate air one more time for the pilot when he is taking off or landing there. There are other there are other ways to get that information now. It's just that's a little bit more inconvenient to check the notice for airman missions. It's not,
Missions.
yeah,
not
missions.
men.
You know, you have to go online on a computer, or if you're coming into Coeur d'Alene, you can call Spokane Approach. I've never done that, but maybe that's a possibility to check to see if the runways are open or closed. The one thing is to eliminate air, but you won't ever eliminate all.
Right.
Because we still have people coming into the airport without a radio, or they don't bother checking, they're landing the opposite way, or they're flying the wrong patterns. So, I mean, it's one thing that will help, but it won't solve all the problems.
No, and with human nature,
The
you will
human
never
element, right,
solve all the problems.
Yeah, because if you're gonna try to eliminate all air, you're either gonna go broke or crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, not possible.
Okay.
Then we moved on to minimum standards, and this really came out of something is that Stephen and the airport, we wanted something for skydiving operations, because in the original minimum standards, we didn't put anything in there. And it kind of morphed into a few other things for SASOs, which stands for Specialized Aviation Services Operations. We didn't have one for mechanics, and we didn't have one for skydiving. So that was put into the minimum standards. We agreed with how it was written, except for the issue with the skydiving operations of having to shut off their motor when they loaded airplanes. It turns out that a lot of other skydiving operations are doing that. So it'd be hard to also patrol. And so the board suggests that piece about the skydiving operations having to shut off their motor be removed. But once again, it's up to you. And then, so those are the two things that, and then the other thing that came out of that, we added a section in there about when we could close the airport or limited certain special aviation activities on the airport. I don't know, some of us aren't really sure if there's a need for it, but the board had a discussion, and amongst ourselves as well as Stephen, and there may be a time when we'd have to do that. What that entails is that we'd have to have a posted notice of a meeting of the advisory board, and the advisory board can make a recommendation that those activities are limited, and then we can move forward with limiting those activities. Personally, I don't see when that's gonna be used. Stephen does, but I don't know why you just can't drive down the taxi lane and tell people to cool it for a little bit because of this is going on, but at least it's in there officially now. Go ahead, Stephen.
And the reason why we requested it, and I wanted it in there, is because right now the airport actually can do that today, but we don't provide how we determine to limiting those factors. This provides a due process in how we're doing that. And that's why I wanted to add it. Because I could issue a NOTAM today, right now, limiting flight training into the airport right now. I could get on my phone and do it today. This actually will provide a process in place that establishes why we're doing it instead of just.
Does that come after you close the airport?
No, this would become before it.
See, if you see a hazard,
So if there's a hazard.
I want it closed, and you can deliberate about it later and confirm what you,
So we can close the airport for anything, but if we're limiting a certain type of operation, that's where we want to have that conversation about. Because we can still, it still specifies in the minimum standards, for any safety-related concern, the airport staff can close for any reason. But if we're limiting a specific operation type, that's different. So.
That's, what you're saying, what I think you're saying is that that's longer term, it's not event driven
It's not,
necessarily.
it's not an event driven. If you're closing for the airport due to an accident, that could be 2 to 3 hours. If you're closing an operation, say flight training or touch and go operations, that's probably gonna be 2 to 4 days due to an event that's occurring. And so we wanna have that conversation.
The other thing I'll add is we left, this was on the agenda in November. We left it open for 5 weeks and requested comments. We had comments from the Coeur d'Alene Airport Association basically saying that there's so many changes that they'd like to see in these minimum standards that they'd like to open up the whole document. My response, I think the board's response was let's make a list, keep a list, send them to Stephen, someday down the road, they may be reopened and we could take a look at all those things that are concerning. Once again, it goes to the thing about let's have a collaborative conversation and try to work through these issues. And then we had some comments from Steve Anderson, and I believe Steve's here, but I think we answered most of those. So
Okay.
I feel pretty good about that. And that's all I have.
When would the other comments or the document for that matter be revisited?
So an airport typically visits them every 5 years unless there's some other item that occurs, like a skydiving SASO comes to the field, something you don't plan or see into the future of. And then you'll reopen the document. So it could be at the outside, you revisit it every 5 years, and it could be as much as looking at the advisory board looks at it in 5 years and says, nope, we're good. We don't need to revisit it. And that's it.
But if somebody brings something to the table and says, this is an issue, we would like it revisited, then that's when the advisory board will look
Right,
at that
right.
specifically.
Yeah, if somebody comes in 2 years or a year and says, hey, we want to talk about this, the board can take it up then. Look at it and say, yeah, we'll change that now, or you can say, no, we're not going to change it. It's just depends on what's submitted.
Okay,
It's no different than any living county document.
fair enough. Greg?
No, that's where I'm at. Stephen can talk about the north side hangar development where we have a request to have hangars that are higher than the 35 feet.
Sorry, I just have one more question. When are the minimum standards coming to us?
So if there's no real questions on them, they'll be sent to legal, and then it'll be after the legal review, which shouldn't take too long, so 2 weeks.
So it's this year?
Yeah.
Okay, so you'll let us know what the changes are, because I've read what the changes were proposed, but now the advisory board's changed it again, so that's what I don't have.
It was only one change. It was removal of one sentence.
Okay,
That was it.
so wasn't there something about porta potties or something
Yeah,
requiring
that-
those?
That was cleared up in the conversation. There's some tenants out there that have porta potties. And there was that, the wording was, is if you require sewer, you shall hook up to the water and the sewer system. So it was like, well, if I need a porta potty, do I really require sewer? And I believe the answer was no. If you're a commercial operation though, and you're gonna be having clients in and out of your building, and you're gonna need a sewer, you're probably gonna have to put in a sewer rather than have a porta potty.
Yeah, it really ties back to whether it's a commercial business or not.
Okay,
So if you're a private hangar, we don't require it to have a bathroom. If people choose to, so be it.
right,
But if you're a commercial entity, that's when we require you to have a bathroom.
okay,
Understood. Okay.
thank you.
Anything else on this? Okay, north side hangar?
So this is just a hangar that is actually, in the minimum standards, we specify that anything over 35 feet needs approval from the advisory board. That's why it protects the airport from any large-scale hangars that may not fit with future needs. And this is a hangar there's actually 3 of them as part of a development on the north side. There's about 42 feet. Empire's actually taller than this, so it's just a preliminary check, and that's all it is.
Okay.
The board approved it too.
Okay, so you don't see any issues with it?
Nope.
Okay. Staff reports or updates?
I think
So we
we're
had
at
a
fees, airport fees.
airport fees.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I?
Vector.
So this was,
Oh, okay, sorry.
this
go
was
ahead.
just a preliminary discussion, just a reminder of upcoming items, with fees. Right now, we anticipate, what we're seeing with CPI, we're seeing between a 7% and 9% increase on CPI. So what we're talking about there is rental increases. And that's what we've typically done for our rent increases, is just CPI adjustment. So we should have that in the next few weeks, maybe a month, depending on how fast we get that back. And then the other was an adjustment to our airport use fee, to be more in line with a couple other airports in the state, specifically Haley. And they charge per 1,000 pounds, and this was a proposal. We've talked to them on it. I've talked to this company called Vector on and off a few times over the last couple of years. They were previously had required a camera system be installed. There was a massive financial cost of having to track aircraft. They've changed this now to where it's not, but it'd be following similar to what we charge already of anything above right now it's 12.5. We would look to lower this to about 8,000. If the board doesn't want to, that's fine. But we'll bring this back as a conversation piece to the advisory board to have more conversation about this. It's just was a preliminary discussion that they put together as what they see a little bit nationwide. And they're working on redoing some numbers from last year as well.
Okay. Anything further on fees?
Well, just on.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Quickly on the CPI, Stephen, just so I understand it too. Like in the case of my lease, every 5 years it gets revisited. So unfortunately, this is the year mine gets revisited, so it will probably go up. Where if it was last year, it would have probably stayed pretty close to the same.
It would have stayed pretty close to same. You would have seen maybe a penny increase. Now you're gonna see penny and a half to 2 penny increase, yeah.
But it's not an immediate hit for everyone until they're,
But it's,
Comes
what
for
their lease
review.
says.
but our average increase, for example, last year was a 1.5% increase. This year, we're at 7 to 9% increase. That's a pretty drastic change. Yes, there should have been some, we shouldn't have been at 1.5 increase last year. That was really low. But, because our average CPI is between 2.5% and 3.5% for the last 5 years, excluding these 2 years. So that's where we're kind of at right now.
All right. And is the same CPI used? Because I know there's a Northwest region and all kinds of different.
So we
You're probably using a national.
we use the national consumer goods pricing.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on airport fees? Okay. Staff reports or updates?
Yeah, so we had a couple of things. There was one item that we kept hearing some comments about is that the airport was trying to close 220, which is our smaller runway.
Yeah.
This was a misstatement or miscommunication or misunderstanding of what was actually said. So what was actually said is the airport was, I had a conversation with Steve Anderson a couple weeks ago. And in that conversation, we started discussing the decoupling and runway 220. And my comment to him was, during the decoupling discussions a few years ago, we did another wind analysis. In that wind analysis, we found that 624 actually has above 95% wind coverage for all categories of aircraft. What that means is that is the cutoff for when the FAA states that they will support one runway, and that's all they'll support is one runway. So that was the conversation is we're starting to say is at our next master plan, so the next couple of years, we need to start documenting on why we need to keep 220. Why it's so important, why it needs to be kept in general. And that somehow got morphed into why that we want to get rid of it. So that was not the case. It's more of we need to start working together to how do we save it? Because the FAA doesn't care about use, they don't care about ease of taxiing, it's dollars and cents and their data. That's all it is.
Okay. And then our last update, was that the same case or was the wind different at the last
So we're
master plan?
So the last master plan was 94
It's just under 95.
90.96 or
Okay.
something like that. So we're seeing the wind shift to support 624 more and more. The thing is when we do our next master plan in 2028, 220 is due for a rehab.
Right,
And
so
it's
that's,
due for lighting upgrade, rehab. It's a major project.
yeah.
And if we can't justify it, that's gonna fall on the county and taxpayers either to maintain it or to close it. And the belief that the FAA won't just let it be and say good luck to it is the FAA has said we are not gonna support multiple runways throughout the Northwest.
Will another wind study be done closer to that? Okay.
And if it comes back and shifts back more, great, but we still need to go into that conversation knowing that that is a strong possibility.
Okay, Stephen, so for anybody listening in, explain the 95 threshold, please.
So 95% is there's four different categories of wind, of crosswind components. It's 10.5, 13, 15.5, and 17 knots. And so if they basically go to different categories of aircraft. So right now, 624 supports everything from 13 and up. But does not support wind coverage for 10, which is basically A1 and B1 category aircraft. So that's why we can justify runway 220 as is, as a A1, B1 runway.
What are A1, B1?
Small aircraft.
Okay.
Most single engine aircraft. There are some larger, but basically single
Okay.
engine aircraft. Cessna 172s.
More susceptible.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're more susceptible to higher winds.
Okay.
And so that runway is there to support that. But if the wind coverage continues to shift to say 624 is 95%, that's the FAA's magic number, whether we agree to it or not. It's their rules, it's their money.
Right.
And if we exceed that,
We exceed 95%, they'll say you have one runway and that's all we're gonna support,
Unless we can come with our justification.
the justification.
Because if the airport were 50% A1 and B1 and they can't land 5% of the time, that's,
In their opinion, as long as it's 95%. So that's where we have the conversation of, well, we have this much traffic on it, this is our taxi times, we have different justifications that we push
sure.
of why we need this runway. We have the separation of traffic counts, we have all these other items that we will argue with the FAA about it.
Sure.
And once we get to that point, we go into that master plan knowing that's an item and we already have everything lined up. That's how we win that fight.
fair enough. Okay, keep going.
Go ahead and talk about 220 being closed. That didn't help the conversation.
So then we also, this has been a terrible 3 weeks that we had winter there. We had actually a severe ice issue on 220. So far this year, we've actually spent about $25,000 on de-ice chemical. On a typical year, we spent about 10, and we're at 25 already. We typically don't use de-ice on 220 because we concentrate primarily on 624 on winter ops because it has all of our approaches, it has everything. It's our longer, wider runway. That's why we concentrate on that. But we do put chemical on it when it's major things, but our chemical doesn't work when it was so cold. It only really works down to about 25 to 26, and that is very slow. And we had, with getting that 6 inches of snow and then rain on top of it, it was a mess. So we had 220 was closed for a long period of time, but 624 was open every day, basically. So.
Okay, keep going.
Well, you want to just touch on what it means to be a Part 139, because I recall that runway being icy and being able to be used.
Yeah, so a Part 139 airport, because we have a snow and ice control plan, we actually have to limit, we have a requirement stated in that state when we have to close runways, specifically if there's 2 inches of dry snow, if there's ½ inch of slush, if there's any ice, we actually have to close and do something. And it's to ensure the safety of the operations of that runway.
Thank you.
Okay, go on.
We also had 1/3 of our snow equipment down when we had the meeting. We still have 3 of those pieces down. We may never get one of those pieces back up, actually. It's our main snow blower. We're hoping to get parts for it, but it's a 1993. It's about $1 million piece of machinery to replace it. We also have we've talked about this in the past, the FBO changes. Stancraft has purchased out Resort. They are now down to 1 FBO on the field. We've been hearing some comments, both good and bad. I will leave those to other people to comment yes or no about. But I can say that our fuel costs have gone up significantly, so.
It's called pricing power.
Yes.
All right.
We also have our Part 139, Part 139 inspection scheduled for February 2nd to the 5th. That'll be they're inspecting us in Spokane at the same times. We also sent out our, multiple hangar notices. Basically, it's our, you have not built yet, and if you don't submit community development plans and building plans soon, we're gonna terminate your leases. Right now, we're down to 4, and they have until the 31st to have submitted plans. And if they don't, we'll be back before the board to do, realistically, probably a 7-day cure. So,
All right.
So with this just building plans, we're not requiring them. I mean, it's, you can't even get a building built, so,
no, it's, you have to have plans submitted to the building department. And then we're saying they have to start construction by the end of May. So that gives them 6 months basically to get through community development. If community development can't get through that, we'll adjust. But for the most part, everybody anticipates getting through.
so if we, because we don't know how the SRE building's gonna turn out, if we keep delaying the SRE building because it's out of budget, are we still gonna force hangar tenants to build out of budget?
We've had people that are able to build, that can build. I mean, the problem is our site can't be built on anything. It's not, we wanna allow a hangar develop in that area. That won't fit. We still have a waiting list. If people wanna build, they're finding ways. We have 5 hangars going up right now. So.
Okay. Anything else?
We also have the engineering report, if anybody wants to, you have any questions on that, it's the TO report, if you have questions, we can go through that, but we are gonna be bidding out the SRE building again here shortly, as well as the initial electrical work project soon as well. Oh, and also the commemorative Air Force, we are working on
Go ahead.
another Air Expo here to be in the 2nd or 3rd week in July.
All right. And that's committed?
They haven't committed fully yet, but they like coming here.
Okay. Fair enough. Is that it for review then? The airport minutes?
There was some public comment, which is listed there.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, fair enough. Noted.
that's it.
Okay, so let's move on to item 2, Ramsey Road, City of Hayden purchase, general discussion.
So I just provided you an updated image. This is kind of, I figured we'd be better than the engineer's document. This is not, I'm not providing the pricing or anything. This is just an FYI that we've received initial offers from the City of Hayden on these 2 parcels. One is just a temporary construction easement. The other is actually to purchase property. Part of it is gonna be a cost to pay the shelter for some of their fence moving, so we'll have to pay them for some of their lease improvements. But we need to do a little negotiation on this one for the red section. The green section is just the easement for the construction easement. There is another section that they don't have approval to offer yet, which is on the very east side of the airport. That one will actually be the real negotiation because they made the offer but didn't have approval for it, so they had to rescind the offer. If that makes sense. And so it's based upon what they're offering they don't want to purchase all of the 3 acres from us. We don't want to own the non-economic remainder. So we want them to, because we don't want an island outside of our fencing.
Okay. And that's what's prompting the purchase, the potential purchase?
What this is for Ramsey Road to go through.
Okay,
And it is, the FAA has already released this property, it's already been cleared. Right now, legal is reviewing the documentation. From me looking at the appraisal, it looks like it's in line for what we're seeing for pricing per square foot. So it seems fine. Realistically, the red is not that big of an area either, especially with Humane Society leaving here in the near term too.
Okay. Anything else on second item? Okay, moving on. Coeur d'Alene Skeet and Trap update.
This is just a document that I updated with the actual, the pack numbers, and if there's any questions, I know we're gonna talk about this at 2:00. That's it. It's just if there's any other numbers you'd like me to run before that, or anything else.
Go ahead, Leslie.
Well, a couple different things. The appraisal is based on best use, and I know that Spokane Gun Club had about the same amount of area to clean up, and it was about $3 to $4 million. And so I don't believe that this parcel is worth $295 like the appraiser said, because the appraiser based it on, highest and best use available, not the cleanup, not the fact that they have the 35-foot limit or the noise or any of those things. So I don't really think we're dealing with that full appraisal amount. And I think that
The appraisal was done with the hypothetical assumption, right, that the land was not contaminated.
Yes, but I would also argue that per the contract that the gun club signed, that states that they are responsible for
For the
returning
cleanup.
it to
Right,
previous condition,
Okay.
which is before they existed.
Right.
I'm not arguing whether they can or can't, but I'm merely stating what the contract says.
sure,
So if you follow what the contract says, that's what it says.
right. And the lease was signed with the commissioners, not with the airport. So there's a little bit of stuff I want to clear up on that too. And then their lease isn't up until April of 2023. So I think we have some time.
We do, but I talked to a couple of people with the ski club. And I was disappointed to have them say, if you charge us anything above what we're paying now, we'll just go bankrupt. Have you heard that, Stephen?
I have. I tried to meet with Steve Thurman to basically provide him with this same spreadsheet, and he didn't want to meet with me. So,
And Steve's on the board.
yes.
Okay, and go ahead, Leslie.
No,
And I spoke with Ed Wagner yesterday, and basically indicated to him, their claim is they cannot afford this. And given their structure today, I can understand that. I guess, and what I expressed to Ed was, look, we can't continue to subsidize whatever the value is to the shooting community. It's still ultimately a hobby. But nevertheless, they have enjoyed, the privilege of being able to operate for whatever it was, $1 a month. Clearly, that can't continue. But then on the other hand, do we want to price it to such a level that forces them out? So there has to be, I think, some level of compromise. I don't know where that is. My understanding is they're not charging membership today, or if they are, do those rates have to? Go ahead, Stephen.
I don't know what exactly I don't know what their membership, how they do it or not. But there's a reason why gun clubs you don't have gun clubs on airport property, because we get forced into charging market rates due to FAA requirements. That's why we've already released this property. It's already been cleared. So if it's purchased out, the county can do whatever it wants.
And what is that FAA requirement if we don't do that?
If we don't purchase it out, or if we
don't charge,
don't charge, it's technically considered revenue diversion.
and what,
So revenue diversion is the FAA could come back in and say, you're economic discrimination, so you're in violation of grant assurances, but you're also doing revenue diversion, which means the FAA could come in and say, you actually owe the airport as the county X number of dollars per year since the existence of the lease.
but we could also petition the FAA and say that this land is not worth this amount of money for these reasons.
And their comment most likely will be what is the lease state, and also my argument is they're stating is that the land is contaminated, therefore it should be lower in value, but they're the ones that contaminated it.
Sure. I understand that, but if they walked away today, we're not going to be able to sell that land for what the appraised value is.
Yes.
So I think there's more work that can be done in this situation.
clearly.
And they have a lease until April 23. So I think that there's some other people that are involved at the state level as well, so.
Okay, so you're not suggesting, Stephen, that we necessarily take any action before April of
No,
23?
what we need a direction to say, my goal is to provide them as much time as possible so that they can plan and prepare. So that if we provide them a direction to say, hey, this is what we want, this is what I'd hope out of this 2 o'clock meeting is, well, we would like to see this dollars per square foot or this much per year. That way that we can start have that conversation with them.
Okay, so in my conversation with Ed Wagner yesterday, what I suggested, I said, look, what can you do? If this is not acceptable, if this will overburden you, what can you do? And again, I'm going back to, I don't think we can sustain whatever it is, $1 a month.
$1,000 a year.
Say that again?
$1,000 a year.
Is there a proposal?
No, that's what they pay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, that's still above $1 a month, right? Okay. Okay,
That's it.
all right. Fair enough. Okay, so we have a meeting at 2 o'clock?
Well, no, it's just our regular update.
It's a regular status update. And, okay, so right now you're looking for direction, and I think, at least from my perspective, is I'd like to see what they can come back with. And from what I'm hearing, I don't know that they have made a counteroffer.
Well, their comment is, well, we haven't offered them anything. That's why I want a direction I prefer a direction from you as the board at 2 o'clock to say, well, this is what we think we should offer initially. Whether it be something like what we did with PAC, whether it be a flat fee per year for the 30 acres, whatever it is, we start that point.
What is the minimum amount that you think the FAA would be satisfied with?
I have no idea on that.
Thanks.
From what you indicated when we went through this with PAC, Panhandle Area Council, my understanding is what the FAA, according to you, what the FAA was looking for was that we were making some progress in the direction of getting them up eventually to market rent.
That's the big thing, is you're making progress. It's that's where your defendability is, as you're making progress to be at the
Understood.
point there, being fair market value.
Bill, you have participated in the sport and you're familiar with these organizations. What is a reasonable, if you can answer this, annual fee for membership?
Well, it depends honestly on the location. Talked to a lot of people about specifically Coeur d'Alene, and they're recommending that you start somehow, even if it's very low, as long as eventually it comes to market rate, and that might be in 2050.
And my big concern is, as I said with Wally, is okay, say we did the 100,000 and then you went up 20,000 over the next 20 years. Well, what happens at that 20 years of when the land values again in 20 years? How do you eventually catch up? Because eventually you do need to catch up.
I think they need to buy it.
I don't disagree,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because it's realistically, they are controlling and limiting about 36 acres, because we truly can't do anything with that 36.
Right, but their lease is for 27.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Let's see what happens at 2 o'clock anyway. Okay.
Well, it's, 2 o'clock's gonna be the same thing as this discussion right here. There's nothing else. Nobody's presenting. This is it.
Right, but I want to understand and I want to hear it publicly what it is they're countering with.
Then,
No, I need,
What do you,
to me, we need some sort of direction from the three of you of what's the initial offer that you would like to make to the gun club?
well, okay, here's the situation. If we're going to make an offer to the gun club, I guess I need to know, if I'm gonna make a reasonable offer, what can they charge for membership? What's reasonable?
Well,
I don't know that.
And what, excuse me, what kind of cleanup and how much will that cost? Because that hasn't really been factored into this appraisal.
If you, the cleanup could be anything, my guess is from $1 million to 2 to 3 million
For cleanup.
for
Yes.
cleanup.
Yep. That's what Spokane's having to pay.
That's what they're having to pay.
Yeah.
And your position is what, Leslie? That there's no rush at this point?
Well, I think that gun clubs have special protection under state law. So I want to make sure that we're,
You know, what,
Having a
what
balancing
protection do
act.
they have?
well, they can't be forced out. Now, whether that,
My understanding is they can't be forced out if they own the land.
okay,
These people don't own the land.
sure,
You speak up a little.
yeah.
Sorry. I'm losing my voice already.
Yeah.
Oh, pull the-
So there's other state people involved. So I'd like them to get what they think going forward. I mean, this is what Stephen has prepared. So presenting something to them is one way or another. I mean, it doesn't matter if he presents this to them or not. This is just a preliminary schedule. So they still need to do their homework and come back with what they feel is reasonable. So,
Which is what I'm saying as well. Right.
yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. We'll ask the question again at 2:00. All right. Okay. Final item. Liaison change. Leslie.
I've been approached by hangar owners and airport users to be more involved at the Coeur d'Alene Airport. And so I'm very interested in trying to get some of these long-term issues settled before they become contentious. And I really want the best airport possible. So one of those ways is for me to become the liaison. Bill and I spoke yesterday, and there's another way that I can be still involved and not take over the liaison if he's not wanting to relinquish that situation. So I'm willing to be involved and to meet with different users and owners. And it's not just the Airport Association that we're talking about. I've talked to other owners and operators on the airport, not a part of the association, and they do have some concerns about some things. So that's all this was about.
Bill.
Biggest concern that most people have is to fire Stephen. And that to me is not a legitimate concern. I suggested to Leslie that she can meet with, talk to, get feedback from all the people that she wants, and then bring them to the association or bring them to the board. We don't have to hold hearings and things, which would, if we did, that would be illegal. So.
I never mentioned hearings at all. I don't know
said-
about that.
I didn't say you did. I said, we don't have to do that, sort of thing.
Okay, so let me jump in here. Any commissioner is welcome to attend any meeting of any group and meet with any of the department heads. Obviously, if that commissioner is not the liaison for that group, out of courtesy, should inform that the responsible commissioner, the liaison, that that's what they're doing. You're welcome to attend any and all the meetings. In fact, and I'm glad you did speak with Bill, when, was it about a year or so ago, you had requested juvenile probation and juvenile detention. And I agree, actually, I spoke with both Debbie and JT. They were fine with it. I said, fine, go ahead, go right ahead. I don't know if we traded anything, I can't remember. But anyway, you're welcome to attend. I can attend those meetings. Now, I choose not to because of the volume of work, and I figure if Bill's handling it, if you're also there, I would prefer to wait until things come before me and we have to make a decision, or I can talk with any or both of you during any of the open meetings. But you're always welcome to be there. As long as we're not in
Legal just
violation.
doesn't feel like it. I'll check with legal again, but like advisory board attendance, legal's not going to want both of us at the advisory board because that leaves you out of potential decisions that we're
And you have
gonna-
a quorum, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my position is a simple one. If any one of us wants to ask for another liaison ship, for lack of a better term, or substitute ourselves for one or the other, I think that individual that's going to relinquish it should agree. And, you know, unless Bill is willing to agree to formally relinquish it, I think it has to remain the way it is.
Don't see anything you'll regret.
I'm
My,
just,
my position is that if any of the departments that I liaison with wants a shift, they just got to say, Bill, we'd rather have so-and-so, and that's okay.
I'm just providing that we do record and place the airport advisory board meetings on YouTube, so they are available after as well.
Have I said that to you, though?
Yep.
For how long?
Since you've been my liaison.
Okay. That's the way I practice is, if somebody wants somebody else, that's okay.
Anything else on this topic?
I'm good.
Okay. Public comment? Please, come forward.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Mike Ukowski. I'm a hangar owner at the airport.
So is your red light or
Yeah,
green
just
light?
make,
Yes.
yeah, just,
Goes green?
yeah, there
Yes.
you
There you
go.
go.
There we go. Let's start over again. Good morning. I'm Mike Hinkowski. I'm a hangar owner at the Coeur d'Alene Airport. And I have a couple of comments based on some discussion that's taken place this morning.
Sure.
Earlier, they talked about a situation where the airport might be closed. And Greg mentioned that Steve might run up and down the taxiway to notify people. Okay, that's a perfect example where, as I'm a pilot, I start up my aircraft, I either go into a hover or pull up to the taxiway from the taxi lane. One of the first things I do is turn on the AWAS, because I want to know what's going on prior to departure. So if they had an appended AWAS like they used to, I guess I'm considered an old timer. I've been around since 2005, and I thought the AWAS, as it stood back then, where it could be appended to, was a very good feature. So that's just one example of why I think we should have an AWAS that has that capability. Okay, the other thing that wasn't really mentioned during the discussion was when I made the presentation at the Airport Advisory Board meeting, I informed them that the cost of a new AWAS was around $100,000, and this was based on information that we believed to be reliable. Okay, there are grant monies available, and it's in that letter, that discussion that I provided. There's grant monies available to take care of 90% of that. And what the Coeur d'Alene Airport Association suggested is that we help to raise the money for the remaining percentage to put that AWAS in place. So we'd like to discuss that further because for a number of reasons, I think it's all related to safety. The other issue was the CPI increase. Okay, I've been around long enough to know the Jimmy Carter years. And when was that? Back in the 80s, 79, 80.
Yeah, it was late 70s, early 80s.
And we had huge inflation back then. So the CPI was off the charts. Well, I just read that the CPI has exceeded that. So it's a blip, though. And I would caution you in raising lease rates based on a blip in the CPI. That really needs to be smoothed out somehow. Because if we should get an administration in that knows how to run a country, I think we'll see that drop back down to a level that's more reasonable. So if you're charging poor Greg based on the current CPI and then it blips back down again, this poor guy is paying 7-8% more for his lease, and a couple years later everybody else is only seeing a 2%, 1.5% increase.
Could we look at that on a quarterly basis?
Well, I don't know what way, there are other metrics for determining the raising of lease rates. I don't know if CPI is the best one, but there are other ways to do that. So I just would ask that the commissioners consider other ways of doing that and the fact that we're looking at a blip here.
Because it used to be you could pay for your down payment on your home with a credit card, and it would be cheaper than borrowing the money from the bank. You remember that?
Not any-
I don't remember that.
That was the same time with Jimmy Carter.
Anyway,
I didn't have a credit card big enough back then when I bought my first house, so.
Stephen, let me ask you a question. Do you typically review these on an annual basis?
So reviewed every year.
Okay.
So some of them some of the leases are actually very limited. It states only CPI. Those are the older leases. The newer leases, it's a lot more leeway in what we can do. But the older ones, it clearly states CPI only.
Okay.
So we're stuck in that it has to be CPI. And it's also not just a 1 year average. We level them out over that time frame. So it's not just, it takes into account the 1% and then also the 9%, so it levels them out.
Mike, anything else?
Yes, on the subject of airport liaison, seems like what I'm hearing is that, Bill, if you want to remain liaison, Leslie can do whatever she wants to do as far as attending meetings, but then she has to go back to you and discuss what's gone on in a meeting.
No, I would like her to, but she doesn't
Okay.
need to.
It seems like it might be better if you would just attend the meetings.
I do.
I've never seen you at
Uh,
a Coeur d'Alene Airport Association.
Stephen,
Pardon?
Stephen, do I attend meetings either on Zoom or in person?
Advisory boards.
Yes, you attend the advisory board meetings.
I'm sorry.
It gets messy when you have two commissioners in a meeting. And
Understood.
if it's not clerk, that whole routine, it's an
Understood.
issue.
Well, that would be the reason for transferring that function over to somebody else who, because there's a lot of information that's shared in the Coeur d'Alene Airport Association meetings that you don't get in an advisory board meeting. So it's a lot of the opinions of what's going on, and I think that's germane to the discussion, what the opinions are going around. And I think it's important, as Leslie mentioned, to head things off before they develop into a critical issue.
How many members are there on the Airport
I
Association?
don't know, how many are there now?
We're approaching 50 this year.
50.
Yeah, and it's growing because it's under new management, and we're taking a different approach to things,
Okay.
less
If the
confrontational.
Airport Association feels that's important, I'll be happy to attend those.
Well, thank you for considering that, and that's all I have.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mike. Okay, anyone else? Go right ahead, Steve.
Steve Anderson. Thank you, Commissioners, for your consideration of Commissioner Duncan's request. What I would like to say is that I've had the opportunity not only to attend a number of these meetings and witness the way that she conducts herself and the integrity that she has shown in the questioning that she's done. It appears that you've already made your decision as to not allow her to be the liaison, but in addition to observing her here, I've also witnessed her at the Harbs meeting. She conducts herself with the same amount of integrity as she does here. She's attended the Coeur d'Alene Airport Association meetings and listened to the concerns we've had. And as far as I know, I think that she listens to the director and considers his positions as well, because she has never always sided with the position that I may have. In spite of the fact that I always think I'm right, she takes a very even-handed approach. And I hope that if she elects to make the request again, that you will consider the amount of time that she's dedicated to something that goes beyond her normal liaison work. I think she must be a workaholic because she's got a number of other groups that she also liaises with. I just think that she's got a passion for keeping this airport a viable part of the community, and I think that there's issues that are on the horizon that need to be addressed, and not just addressed in the Board of County Commissioners meeting. There's opportunities to keep things from becoming adversarial if we all talk with each other. So I guess I just want to thank you for hearing me out, and Commissioner Duncan, thank you for your efforts in making the request that you've done.
Let me try and respond, Steve. There's also a situation with workload, and Leslie has liaises, if you will, to a number of organizations. And so we have to, if she's going to take this on, she has to forfeit something. Okay, we can't have a situation where one commissioner is overburdened. And yes, she's exhibited the passion, and she also has a passion for public defense. And frequently, I will, step aside in certain cases because I realize that, but I still hold on to it as the liaison because obviously she can only take on so much. In fact, if you recall, when the subject of the Joint Powers Agreement came up, she said, "Matt, we already have too much on our plate." And she does as well. So I'm concerned not as much with the balance. Now, if she wants to approach Bill and say, "Okay, look, I'd like to take the airport," what is she willing to give up? And then again, he has to agree to that. And so, and I understand your concern, but I'm just trying to paint the picture of what we actually deal with here in terms of workload and balance.
I appreciate your response.
Sure. I do want to say that I'm not going to offer to take on anything I don't have time for.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, sir.
Shane Rogers, excuse me. So I'm just gonna kind of briefly address the liaison as well. Bill, I've only met you here, so we've never had that. I've seen Leslie around the airport a handful of times. I know you're on the meetings and Zooms and things like that. I've seen that at going to the airport advisory meetings. So I know you're paying attention on what's going on and have your ear to the ground, if you will. But on the same token as Leslie has put into a valiant effort, if you will, around the airport, it seems like, and has a true desire to kind of bridge everybody together, be it from Stephen, and I think there's been some entities in Bill's defense that have looked poorly on Stephen for one reason or another. There's a lot of us that we interact with Stephen and don't have any issues with that as well. So for Leslie, I want to thank you for what you've done. If it ever gets brought up again, I would love to have this re-looked at. I think it's good in any type of public entity to change the tides, if you will. Bill, you've been doing it, I think, 3+ years, if I'm not mistaken, there, and it's great. And you look at the growth at the airport and the things that have happened, it's been phenomenal. But on that same token, as things do get stale, and they're that's not directed at you, but there's things that she might be able to bring a different communication line than others have. So that would be from my standpoint what I would like to just talk about. So thanks for your guys' time.
Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Which one of us? Beside you.
Hi, my name is Rachel Schwalm. I have the Bird Aviation Museum at the airport. I am not on the association. I don't have any problems with the airport, but I just wanted to say I've met Leslie at the airport and I just appreciate what she does. And I'm looking forward to change in the upcoming future. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hi, I'm Elspeth Roach. I'm an airport user, pilot, but I don't have any other financial things in there. But I've met Leslie as well, and Bill also. I want to say to all three of you how much I appreciate what you do for the whole county. I don't live in Kootenai County anymore, but I can say that.
Okay.
So with the airport, yeah, we've seen a lot of change. I know Stephen is working hard to try to bring the airport into the modern world, and some of us don't, understand or appreciate that at the time. And that's where I feel Leslie is really helpful to me in particular, because she does take the time. I don't know how you find the time, but I do have every confidence that you could operate with an extra load. I know as a teacher, former teacher, that, hey, you work until you get your students to understand what's going on, or you're not doing your job. And Leslie has that kind of determination and consistency. She communicates well. She's not there to be taking one side or the other. She's there to collect information and do what needs to be done to convince us, all of us, who are really her boss, that this is the better option, or to convince others that we actually have a leg in the game, and maybe we're right as well. So again, thank you so much for all of you. I hope this isn't a done deal, because I think maybe it is time for a little change. We're willing to change. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Stephen? Excuse me, Stephen. Jonathan?
Yeah, we have several comments online.
Yeah.
First one was from Harry
Can,
Bravado.
can you be heard?
The first one was from Harry Cravado.
Yeah, go right ahead.
He said, in regards to the weather system, he says, call on an expert and see what our systems can do. Mr. Frank O'Connell has a comment. Given the mix of jet traffic, higher speed, and single engine, much lower speed, the two-runway system allows more efficient operations.
Okay.
And why no discussion, same gentleman, why no discussion of the traffic volume? Historically, 75% of KCOE total on 220.
Okay. Anything else?
Mr. Cravado also suggests the gun club do what cleanup they can do, and they have done it in the past. That's it.
So he's suggesting they clean up. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what it sounds like.
Okay. All right.
I just have one more thing to add.
Yeah, go right ahead.
I can understand how it may look that I have orchestrated this, but I have told several people that do not contact the county commissioners for the liaison change. So I've not put these people up to them and asked them to speak on my behalf. This is what has been happening over the past probably 3 or 4 months. They've asked if I'd be liaison. So I said I would bring it up, and I told them do not send in letters, do not advocate for it. But so I'm just letting you know that.
Fair enough. Steve, you had your hand up, sir?
If I could just have one more moment.
Yeah, please. Go
At
ahead.
the last advisory board meeting, I mentioned that I'd gone through the airport master plan again, which is a big undertaking. I think there's 260 pages in that. But in there is a statement that the FAA recommends that for airports without a control tower, that you not have runways that converge as our runway 220 and 624 do. Which begs the question, since I know that the commissioners have approved a study at least to look at a tower, that I would hope that you would slow walk the decoupling until after a decision is made with regard to a tower. And that's in spite of what may or may not happen with regard to the FAA funding 220. And I do want to make it clear that I think that the director did make it very clear to me, and I understood that this was not something that was imminent, but something that we had an opportunity to provide some additional input to the commissioners if you are going to ultimately end up having to fund the maintenance on that runway, that we need to start early on. But I would like, since I know that the decoupling is still moving along, that to the extent that that can be slow walked, no decision be made on spending money to tear up that runway.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Yes, Greg?
I have a comment I probably will regret. It's regarding the liaisons. I think that one of the things in our minimum standards and rules and standards of the airport is that you have a question or a complaint, you're supposed to go to the airport director. And what I think I see happening sometimes is that we're bypassing the airport director. And I think that I would encourage people to talk to Stephen first of all, as Steve Anderson did. You may not like the answer, Steve, but at least you were able to answer
Well, sure.
some things.
Yeah.
I have no problem calling Stephen and telling him my opinion on things, and some things he agrees with and some things he doesn't. But I think if we started at that level first, which it may be happening, but it doesn't seem like it is.
Yes, sir. This will be the last one. We're a little over our time limit, but that's fine. Your name, please, sir?
Don Warner. I don't have any ties to the airport. I am on the Parks and Waterways Advisory Board, just as background, but I was a career Corps of Engineer officer and worked for Honeywell Aerospace for 30 years. So I intuitively trust my gut, and that's personal. I'm not imposing that on you folks. But, Chris, I got to say, I have felt, following Steve's comments over the past couple of months and reading up on what's going on at the airport, it's really a new slice, I think, for the county in the sense of what's happening, growth, imposition, airport usage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My gut tells me, and this is out of respect even for Bill, is it might just be time to get some new blood as the liaison. And hearing what some of the other folks have shared, I have to agree. It kind of causes me to say, reconsider, just think about this, but reconsider. We're in a different season, I think, as regards the whole airport situation. And it might just be good to change the positions of the liaison. I have no allegiance to Bill, you, or Leslie, other than to say, I'd like to see this county at its best and with the people that are there. And I simply suggest just reconsider a liaison. And I don't like the idea of where two commissioners could be at the meeting and Bill's the liaison. I think that's complicated. So this is just, I'm saying this from my own experience in different ways that I experienced. So my point is simply just, would you reconsider and having maybe this opportunity to appoint Leslie as the liaison? And I thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Don. Okay, then. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. 11:14, meeting adjourned. Thanks.